following program on Derana 24 is classified for general audience. It is intended for all ages. It contains little or no violence, no strong language, and little or no sexual dialogue or situations. We would like to remind our viewers that the views expressed in this program by our participating guests are solely viewpoints of them who take part, and does not reflect the views and beliefs of the Derana Media Network.
Welcome down to Gen XYZ right here on Derana 24. Well, today we talk about a very important subject, right? If you're a student after O-levels, after A-levels, probably in university as well, and very interested in debating on an international standard, well, that is exactly why we've actually brought this conversation for you with two absolutely astounding individuals from the Debaters Council. And we're talking about Chanidu and Dineth. So thank you so much for actually joining in on this conversation on Derana 24. Well, the first question for me is, debating is quite, I would say, a massive subject, right? You can talk about many things. It could be, and certain people might actually refer to it as a fight between two individuals, right? But at the same time, you're fighting for something that is important, right? So how did your journeys begin? Let's start with Dineth. How did your journey begin with, debating?
Right. So I went to school at Ananda College, and I think that was when I first got introduced to debating. Some of my seniors, they told me that, look, do you want a place where you can feel more comfortable, learn more things? And I was like, sure, I'll give it a shot maybe, given that there were other extracurriculars as well I was doing. But I think after I went there for a couple of times, I realized that this was the culture at debating was something that like really impressed me. It taught me how to question things, general norms that otherwise people would believe, that generally also things that normal people consider things that should not be questioned, but debating taught me to like critically think about all these concepts. It could be things from how you, general principles, the way you live life, any argument that somebody says. Debating taught me to ask the question, why exactly? So I think after that, I really fell in love with debating in the society. So then I kept on debating during my school years, and even afterwards when I went to university as well, I ended up debating in the university level. I went to some tournaments as well, because I think during COVID, there was a lot of opportunity, there were a lot of online tournaments. I was able to participate in those as well. And I think like I am always been passionate about debating since then, and I felt like it was part of my duty to give back to the local circuit after everything that I had gotten from it. So I again decided to volunteer at the Debaters Council for a year or so, and afterwards here I am as the president now.
Oh, that sounds amazing. Now, congratulations as well, because I think you're a university student. You're prospering in that arena of, debating, really fighting for the why conversation, which is very important. Now, was it the same with you as well, Chanidu? Is that your journey as well, or is it a little different?
Funnily enough, the first part is actually quite similar.
Okay.
Dineth was actually the person that introduced me to debating. We were at school together, although I was in a much lower grade. So he encouraged me to join the debating society. And I think the things that attracted me are very much the same things that attracted Dineth as well. I really enjoyed the culture in debate societies. In schools in Sri Lanka, it was a very welcoming, open culture. Obviously, it's a space in which you're constantly challenging each other's ideas and preconceptions. But despite that rather, I think it still maintains that ability to attract people from all walks of life. I was significantly younger than Dineth, as well as a lot of my contemporaries in the debate society, but that was never a factor against me, whether that was in selections. Me and Dineth were on a team together for, I'd say, the majority of our time in school. So, I mean, it was a very enjoyable experience. I was also fortunate enough, so I must have joined the Ananda College English Debating Society in 2016. In 2019, I was selected as the reserve of the national team, and then in 2020, I made it onto the team itself, and I got to participate in the World Schools Debating Championship, which is sort of the largest, most prestigious international competition for high school debaters. Think of it as kind of like the Olympiad of debating. And then from 2021 to 2023, I was the captain of the national team. So for me, it was really a highly rewarding experience. I got to meet people from all walks of life. I got to compete at the highest level, which itself is a great honor and privilege. And for me, I guess the lasting attraction of debating is really that it combines, like Dineth said, that element of critical thinking, of really not taking anything for granted, along with the more performative element of getting to speak in front of an audience and to an extent even entertain and engage them. And I guess that's why, like Dineth, I'm also still here even after I've graduated from school as a volunteer for the Debaters Council.
Now, you mentioned something very interesting, the World School Debating Championship, right?
Yeah.
So what exactly is that? Can you just tell me what that is?
Well, the World Schools Debating Championship, like I said, is the largest international debating competition for high school debaters. Teams there represent countries rather than individual schools. So Sri Lanka will send a team, India, Pakistan, the US, Canada will all have their own national selection process, and they'll select a team representative of sort of the cream of the crop, the best debaters in that country, and they all compete against each other and try to see who's the best. The competition has a long history. I think it's been going on since 1988.
Okay.
At its inception, maybe there were 6 countries, the kind that you'd expect: US, Canada, Australia. But the World Schools Debating Championship, or WSDC as we call it, that exists now is a radically different competition. I think somewhere close to 85 countries competed last year at the competition, which was in Hanoi, Vietnam. And it really offers opportunities. When people think of debating, particularly English debating, they might think of it as a kind of Eurocentric activity, that there really isn't a space for countries where English is not the predominant language, or where the students who are competing don't have English as their first language. But that's not been the case either, especially in recent history. In 2018, India won the World Schools Debating Championship, and they were the first country where English was a second language that won. In the preceding years, China won the World Schools Debating Championship as well. And in fact, like Dineth mentioned, in 2020, when COVID hit and things went online, the World Schools Debating Championship went online as well, and it was conducted as an online tournament with people speaking to each other through Zoom. And in that year, Sri Lanka was fortunate enough to be the runners-up at WSDC. And since then, in the preceding years, we've managed to maintain that competitiveness. In 2021, we ranked among the top 16 teams in the world. In 2022, we ranked among the top 4 teams, reaching the semifinals. And last year, when WSDC went back to being a physical competition, like I said, it was held in Vietnam, we managed to rank among the top 8 teams in the world, reaching the quarterfinals. So really, I mean, WSDC, much like the school culture that we have here as well, is as open and welcoming and as accepting of not just a few countries, but really all the participant nations, including a small developing country like ours.
Right. You mentioned it's strictly with high school, right? Is there like an age gap for that?
So there are some requirements that you need to meet in order to be eligible to compete. You can't obviously be enrolled in any higher education. There are some age requirements, although given the vast range of countries that compete, there is some flexibility with that regard, given that students in Sri Lanka and India might graduate high school at a later date than, let's say, students in Canada. But really, it is open to all high school teams.
Right. And you had the opportunity of going and representing Sri Lanka.
I did.
You did. And this is Vietnam, or was it in a different country?
So the competition is hosted in a different country each year. There's a bidding process
really? Okay.
to be able to host the competition. In last year, it was held in Hanoi, Vietnam. From 2020 to 2022, the competition was held online. And in 2019, the competition was held in Thailand. This year, the competition is going to be held in Belgrade, Serbia. So really, it's a competition that comes with a great opportunity to travel all around the world as well and get exposure to new cultures.
So which country did you go to?
I had the opportunity to go to Vietnam last year.
Vietnam, right. So you did go to Vietnam, you
I did.
represented. Were you the one who was the runner-up for Sri Lanka?
So that was actually in 2020.
2020, okay.
When the competition was obviously online. And I think that was really, I think part of the reason that we did become runners-up was because the competition was online. Like Dineth mentioned, I think earlier, the Debaters Council is a non-profit volunteer organization. So obviously the resources that we have to work with, and by extension the resources that the national team has available to them, are somewhat limited. Prior to 2020, preparatory competitions for WSDC, so other smaller competitions held in countries, were all held physically. And obviously for Team Sri Lanka, the cost of additional travel to foreign countries was sometimes too high. And so really the opportunities that we had to compete internationally besides at WSDC itself were quite limited. But online debating really changed everything for us. Suddenly, all these competitions that had previously been held physically were now going online. It was very easy for us to be able to go to these competitions, to meet teams from foreign countries, to get feedback from judges who would later be judging us at WSDC, who weren't just the Sri Lankan alumni and volunteers that came back to help. And so really, that caused a massive explosion in the debating culture in Sri Lanka. And I think that was instrumental in us reaching the runners-up position that year. And since then, I think it's responsible for our continued success as well.
Congratulations, man. Honestly, I feel like you guys are doing a great job at just your age as well. I think you're 20?
19 turning 20.
Turning 20, okay, close enough, okay. Amazing job. So I'm going to bounce right into Dineth now. Obviously, he mentioned something which is very interesting, right? India actually won this entire massive championship in debating, being the second language, which is English. So how would you say, especially with everything happening economically as well around the world, Mandarin is actually considered to be the next trade language. English is really dying if you consider it. So how would you navigate that? Because even in Sri Lanka, we have Tamil and Sinhalese, which we need to prioritize as our national languages. We don't necessarily debate in these languages either. We'd be like, if you want to debate, you gotta, study English, you gotta know English, you gotta be fluent in English. But how do you break that stigma? How do you break all of these things?
Okay, so I think 2 points of response. Firstly, with regards to the idea that Mandarin is popular, I think Mandarin is largely popular because China has a large population, and within China, sure, Mandarin is quite useful. But I think when communicating with all the countries in the other world, English is pretty much the language that everybody defaults to as a common language that people can communicate with. So we think that English is still quite important, and in terms of debating, we don't think that English is going anywhere else. And I think this is probably relevant to other fields as well. In pretty much all the fields that you do see, English is used as the common language to get across boundaries for people to share their ideas. I think second point of response regarding the other languages we have, we think that Sinhalese and Tamil, they are also quite beautiful languages, and we actually do have competition for them as well.
Really?
So
okay.
The Law Faculty of Sri Lanka, they organize this all-island debating championship, and it's held in actually all three mediums, English, Tamil and Sinhala as well. So we think that, and I think it's a bit of a misconception that a lot of English is not quite popular. I think we've seen good participation from teams, especially in Jaffna. We've had teams from even Southern Province and all over the country actually. There are children who are quite passionate about English and who are actually better at English than most people would accept. I think probably the only limiting factor is how much exposure they have to the circuit, because earlier I think, especially again coming back to the before COVID issue, tournaments were held physically and people obviously faced the financial difficulty, traveling, all of that. But once we saw tournaments being held online, we noticed increased participation from everywhere in the country. And I think for the first time in history in Sri Lanka, we had people from Kandy joining the national team as well. I think this was a huge barrier. Again, the physical distance, required travel tournaments, all of these factors in a bit. But I think this is something that we are definitely working towards. English is becoming quite popular in debating, and this is not something that people need to be afraid of, and not something I think a lot of people are afraid of anymore either.
So that's your answer for that as well. So I love that answer. I feel like the both of you are on a debate right now against me. I love it, absolutely love it. But, talking in the lines of something that you mentioned, Kandy, there's so much potential when you're considering Jaffna as well, right? There's so much potential because Sri Lanka is a small island, but we have so much talent. But the bad part is exposure, right? We don't get to really go and get these people to come to Colombo because the city center of everything that's happening, going international, everything is in Colombo. So you don't have people coming in from Jaffna, you don't have people coming in from Anuradhapura, down south, all of these amazing, beautiful places in Sri Lanka. So how does the entire system work nationally in order to sort of select them and send them off to, the debating championship?
Okay, so what generally happens is we send out applications for the national pool, and we ask everybody to apply overall. And once
this is through schools specifically.
Yeah,
and it's international, and government schools as well?
Yeah, of course, because we can't, they are all Sri Lankan at the end of the day,
Okay.
and
Yes,
we think
yes.
that everybody is there. Because even Chanidu, I think Chanidu was in Ananda earlier, then he moved to CIS,
Okay.
but still he was in national team, I think, from both. So what happens is everybody sends in their application for the national pool, we go through the pool, there's an intensive process, and then we select people to come for a selection for the national pool itself. And these selections, we have a couple of rounds of debate. I think recently we've made selections online to make it more accessible to people, because it's difficult, like I said earlier. And after selections, we get people, we again look at the debates, we talk with the people who judge the debates, and we finally select a number of people. I think this time it was around 20 people for the national pool. And afterwards, national pool again continues coaching for I think around 1 or 2 months with the people who are planning on, and with some alumni as well. And afterwards, after some practice, after they've gotten the dynamics of it, we again have another selection for the national team. So then within that selection, these are the people, the national team, they receive intense training to get ready to go for Worlds.
All right, great. I want to ask you a very important question as well on the other side. It's about AI, right? AI is taking over the world, and obviously we have a lot of, even journalists who are now becoming AI, animated. It's very scary when you think about it. But I'll talk about it on the other side. This is Gen XYZ right here on Other Derana 24. In case you're wondering what this absolutely beautiful aesthetic place is, it is Felicita Cafe, located at Flower Road. That is where you can come and grab yourself some coffee and have yourself a very chilling, relaxing time as well. Well, with that, we'll bounce right back into a short commercial break. Welcome back to Gen XYZ right here on Other Derana 24, where we're talking about debating, right? If you're a student that loves passionately, wants to debate and bring the conversation of the why, well, this is the conversation that you need to listen to with two absolutely astounding individuals. This is Dineth and Chanidu. Well, Dineth actually mentioned something very interesting as well, which is, the whole process of national selection. You wanted to add something with that in terms of, what the guideline is, what the international regulations are, and because it's not about being fluent in English and debating, it's rather really knowing the guideline of what it is. So can you just brief us on exactly what that is?
So I think an unfortunate misconception that a lot of students in schools have, and this is based on mine and Dineth's personal experiences talking to a lot of these kids, is that they don't feel like they can join English debating societies because they don't feel particularly confident in the language. And obviously that's natural, coming from the fact that English to all of us is essentially a second language. It's not the language that we think in. It's a language that we learn after we've learned a more native language. That is a misconception. Like I said, the style of debating that we're geared towards locally is that World Schools Debate Championship format. And really, that's the kind of format where mastery and absolute fluency of the language is not an absolute necessity, because you think about it, of the 85 schools that are participating at this championship, the minority of schools are going to be those in which English is a primary language. The majority of schools are ones in which it is either a second language or a foreign language. And so for that reason, naturally, the standards of adjudication adapt accordingly as well. and so really, it's not so much about whether you have an expansive vocabulary and you can use some vague niche word that no one else knows, but rather it's about whether you have a basic grasp of the language such that you can communicate the ideas that you have. Because really what distinguishes debating from public speaking as well is the fact that it's not just about being able to speak eloquently and fluently, but it's also about being able to think. It's not enough to just be able to express yourself in pretty language. You need to have actual ideas, and you need to be able to justify those ideas, and you need to know things about the world. And so really, I think if there are kids watching this who are passionate about the idea of really trying to prove their argument, or of really thinking things through and challenging misconceptions, even if they're not confident in the language, I think it's worth their time to join their relevant English debate society.
Chanidu, you mentioned something in terms of you don't necessarily have to be, eloquent in your language, right? But the majority of it, if you consider it on an international platform, if you don't have a fluency in terms of your language, it's biased, right? Because the judgment of that as well is quite biased. What would you take on this? Because you went on an international basis, it's Vietnam, and they would obviously prefer the language, the fluency of the language as a priority as opposed to, the ideology of things. So what's your take on this?
Well, bias is obviously, it's a pertinent issue, particularly in these kinds of international competitions where there's a diverse array of participants. But the thing to keep in mind is, as much as the participation is diverse, the judges are also quite diverse. It's not just people from English-speaking countries who are going to be judging you at these competitions and deciding whether or not to award you a win or a loss. It's judges from all over the world, judges from countries like Sri Lanka, India, Pakistan, South Asia, Asia more generally, even places like South America and Central Europe, even Africa. It really is a truly international competition. So if you really think about it, using the kind of language that is inaccessible to the average English-speaking international person isn't really going to win you any favors at WSDC. And we try to emulate that as much as possible in the Sri Lankan local debating competitions as well. So obviously a grasp of the language is necessary in order for you to be able to express yourself. But there are many people who have succeeded, not just Sri Lankans, but like I said, people from countries like India and China, with what we would consider to perhaps be a less than primary grasp of the English language, where they still think in their native languages. So really, I think debating is more so about the ideas, and I think the judging pool and the standards that we judge debaters by are at this point mature enough that we can see beyond those kinds of superficial things and really look at the ideas and the logic of what they're trying to talk about.
Right. I'm going to bounce off to Dineth because I feel like it's another important question I want to ask you as well. With regards to when he mentioned with the debating council as well, right? And he also mentioned in terms of when you come into the platform, you actually go succeed in it. People from India have actually come through as well, despite it being the second language, which is English. In Sri Lanka, we've had it, I think, since 2006, if I'm not mistaken. Was it established in 2006?
Yeah.
Right. There have been multiple participants who've actually come through, gone on an international platform just like yourself. Has there been anyone, which I feel like is a very important question that everyone wants to know as well, coming into debating, has there been anyone that has actually succeeded from that, moved out of debating and still pursued it in the future career as well?
Yeah, actually, I think a lot of the people who have not just gone to WSDC, but people who have succeeded at even local circuit, local level, have moved on to quite successful careers. We've seen people generally end up at universities like Oxford, Yale, Harvard, and plenty of other Ivy League universities as well. I think this skills that you gain from debating are quite transferable, the skills that are usually looked out from those kind of universities. And this is something I think is quite beneficial as well. I think Chanidu can speak about more of that, on how exactly these people have succeeded, what exactly kind of roles they've actually gone on to as well.
Okay, Chanidu, I think a very interesting fact about you is the fact that you're actually in an Ivy League college, which is Oxford, right? It's not easy to get in, it's not easy to get into an Ivy League college, but you've actually got into it. So congratulations on that, first of all. So tell me exactly how debating really helped you in getting into Oxford.
Well, like Dineth said, debating obviously, alumni who participated at WSDC as well as at local level have succeeded later on in life, attending prestigious universities and working in important careers. Locally, we have kids that go on to attend universities like the University of Colombo, Law Faculty, Law College, the University of Moratuwa. Internationally as well, we've had people achieve success by going to universities, like you said, in the Ivy League, like Harvard and Princeton, or prestigious universities in the UK, like Oxford and Cambridge.
So you're talking about Harvard as well? It's not necessarily the UK, we're talking about US, around the world. Right,
internationally, I think debating really gives you that exposure to the opportunities available throughout the world. And we've had recent alumni go on to make it to universities in the US. In terms of the skill set that prepares you to enter university life and even professional life, I'd say it's three things. The first is the ability to think. And I think this is an underappreciated element of debating, because really all you see when you watch a debate is the people speaking. You see them expressing their ideas and Like we were talking about before, you see the language, you see what's on the surface. But really, there's a lot of thought and preparation that goes into that small 5 or 6 minute speech. It's all the logic that underpins it. It's all the critical thinking necessary to re-examine preconceptions that you might have had about the world, and to think about how a particular policy or particular idea and the merits and demerits that it might have would stack up. It's also thinking about how you deal with the other side. You mentioned before that you felt like you were in a debate. Well, that's how you would always feel if you were a debater. There was always going to be someone that was saying the exact opposite of what you thought, and trying to justify it to the best of their ability. So it's not enough to sort of think in a vacuum. You also need to think about what are the best arguments for the other side and how do I beat them. And so really, I think that skill set of critical thinking is essential to any vocation, to be able to see things from another perspective, to be able to think sort of below the surface. Predictably, as you might guess, a lot of debaters end up pursuing law as a profession, but many others as well. Dineth's a computer science student, and I'm sure those skill sets, although perhaps not immediately clear that they're transferable, definitely are. The second thing I think debating really gives you is exposure. Like I said, it gives you an exposure to the English language. Even if you're not fluent at the point where you join a society, you get the opportunity to practice, to speak with others in English, and to really train yourself to be able to have a strong grasp and command of the language. And really, that's an invaluable opportunity, I think, for many students in Sri Lanka that might otherwise have limited opportunities to train in the English language in that kind of competitive setting where they have support from their seniors and from organizations like the Debaters Council. The third thing that I think it gives you is the credentials to be able to back up the fact that you have those skills, the fact that you get the opportunity to compete in these national competitions, the fact that you can add these to your CV and resume, you can show to prospective employers or to university admission staff that you do have these skills and you have shown that at a competitive level you can succeed, both locally and internationally. And I think that's responsible really for the success of alumni of Sri Lankan debating.
Right. How is Oxford working out for you so far?
Well, I haven't actually attended yet. I have an offer to study philosophy, politics, and economics starting this October. I have some other offers from other universities as well, which I'm considering at the moment. But like I said, obviously, university anywhere is a academically rigorous environment. It's intellectually stimulating. Many people say that a lot of the preconceptions that they had when they were growing up, either in their native countries or at home, are challenged when they go to university and they see that diverse environment. Really, I think debate sort of primes you for that experience. Your preconceptions will be challenged if you choose to enter debating as a high schooler. And so when you get to university, you're really prepared for that intellectually rigorous and stimulating environment. So I guess that's as much as I can speak to right now in terms of how university has been.
That's amazing. You know, I feel like whatever decision you make in terms of searching and choosing your education, all the way best for you.
Thank you.
Dineth, now I obviously mentioned in terms of AI, right? AI is taking over the world. It's probably taking over journalism. It's taking over pretty much every single thing that you see that is a face of something. Debating is also a face of something because you're fighting for it. You have to think on things. You're fighting on very important, information, very important concerns of the country, national concerns of the country as well. So it's very important, very essential. But the problem is AI is taking over the world very badly, right? So do you think debating is or going to be relevant in the future as well?
Yeah, of course. So this is like a topic I'm quite interested in. As a computer science student as well, I am quite interested in AI. So I think in terms of debating, I don't see any threat to debating because of the use of AI. To be honest, I don't see a threat to a lot of other activities because of AI. I think that the AI hype is, like I said, it's a bit of a hype, it's a bit overrated. I do think the AI can be quite beneficial for people, and I think it's going to enhance a lot of professions. I don't see it significantly impacting debating. I think like a couple of reasons for this. One, I think the reason that we debate is we want to train our speaking skills, we want to learn how to think critically. I don't think either of those things can be taken over by AI to that extent. It's not the same when you are maybe, let's say, a small-time graphic designer and maybe somebody else can do the same job for you. But through debating, you actually gain something for yourself. And that's not something you can simply gain by using AI. You can tell AI, type in some words and get some AI chatbot to like say it out in your voice. But that doesn't develop the same skills that you can by speaking out. You're sure you can get some ideas from maybe asking ChatGPT, but that doesn't cultivate the same critical thinking skills that you would if you spend maybe 30 minutes of prep time thinking about that. So I don't see any threat to debating in terms of AI.
But don't you think AI sort of makes you, instead of enhancing your skills, it makes you a little lazy, doesn't it?
I'm sure it does if you do misuse AI. I think that's going to be the same thing. I think if you want to think of it this way, so let's say students now have access to maybe Google search engines. So if you choose to perhaps plagiarize something instead of doing your own assignment, if you get somebody else to do it, then sure, there is a bit of harm for that. So I think the similar thing with AI. If you do the critical thinking part on your own, you can use AI to maybe supplement your language the same way you might use Grammarly or spell checker to check your assignment. So I think in those kind of situations, it would be valuable. If you are lazy and if you do abuse it, then sure, that would be a problem on you.
A problem on you, okay. All right, Dineth, I have to also ask you something a little essential as well. What do you really enjoy debating in? Like, what's your favorite thing? Because I feel like there's concepts of it as well. I think there is international security. There's so many different concepts. So what's your favorite thing to debate?
So I think a couple of topics I really like is I like debating about the justice system. I like debating on usually environmental motions as well. But I also like debating on AI and other technological motions too.
I saw the passion coming out from the AI. Is it the same with you as well, Chanidu?
Yeah, and I think that's a great thing about the activity, which is, like Dineth said, there are some very serious topics that we discuss as well, like politics and international relations and the justice system. But really, debating is an activity that has a wide range and scope for a range of different topics. So at the same competition, you might have topics about international relations and politics and economics, where you have to have very serious debates about very pressing issues. But you might also have more light-hearted debates about entertainment or media or social norms and trends and how they're changing and evolving. So some people feel discouraged from joining debating because they think, I have no interest in economics or in any of these serious pressing issues. But really, if you have an interest in ideas, in logic, in thinking, and in speaking and expressing those ideas, then I think debating is an activity that you'll find very enjoyable. In terms of what I personally like, I do enjoy debates about politics and economics. That's also what I want to study at university. But I also enjoy more light-hearted debates about entertainment and media and narratives.
Right, and you're in media right now.
Exactly.
All right, fantastic, guys. Thank you so much actually for doing this as well. We'll talk a little bit more in depth as to what this event is that you guys want to provoke and promote, right? So with that, this is Gen XYZ right here on Other Derana 24. We'll be right back in a short commercial break right here only on Gen XYZ. Welcome back to Gen XYZ right here on Other Derana 24. Well, we're in conversation about debating. Well, this is with two absolutely astounding individuals. We're talking about Chanidu and Dineth as well. So thank you so much for doing this with us. And now we had a little conversation with regards to how you went international as well, how you've got offers coming in all the way from, such a prestigious institution like Oxford, right? It's very hard and difficult to get in, but congratulations on getting that. And I hope you make the right decision in choosing the right one. Dineth, something that I wanted to mention as well with regards to the event that you actually want to bring light to, right? The Debating Council. Tell me exactly what this Debating Council is, because now you're not in high school anymore, you're in university standing. So tell me exactly what that is.
So the Debaters Council is the national level body that oversees English debating at also school level and also university level. So one of our main tasks is sending a national team to WSDC, but there are also other tasks that we do. So I think our main goal is to spread debating in Sri Lanka, get more kids interested in English debating. And one way we do this is we try to reach out to schools, get them to establish clubs. And I think like lots of people actually reach out to us at first, and what we do is we help them, we give them like starter packs, how exactly do you follow the WSDC format, and also exactly what else do you need to start debating. So we also, as part of the Debaters Council initiative, we do free workshops for schools that specifically request us, especially schools that don't have a lot of access to English debating. And we also carry out other workshops at a price. Mostly these are done to fundraise for the DC, because the DC, like I said, is a non-profit. We don't get money from anywhere. The only thing we get is people who are donors, like donors who give us money on their own free will, but also from the fundraisers we get. So like recently we did a workshop, Chanidu did a workshop as well. This is about how to come up with good arguments. So those are again small workshops we think are beneficial for people to get into debating, but also serve as fundraisers for the Debaters Council, funds that we mainly use for the development of the local circuit, but also to like send the national team to wherever it's being held.
Now you mentioned something about workshops as well. Like what kind of workshops do you do? Where do you host these workshops and so forth?
So it depends on how exactly the workshop comes into play. So if a school usually requests us, they usually give us their venue, or sometimes I think quite easily for most people who don't have venue, we usually do them online. And I think with online you can get lots more people, we can have a time that's convenient for them, and you do a lot of these workshops online. But we also do physical workshops. Some schools are gracious enough to give us their venue, and other schools usually turn up. One workshop that we recently had it in Royal. I think even Ladies College has given us their venues to do these kind of workshops. And we think that physical workshops also has like a different element to it, and that's something that we actually like moving forward as well.
Right, okay. I'm going to come to you. With regards to, you guys are both involved in this debating council. It is not necessarily profited either, right? It's a non-profit and it's a voluntary basis of things. So it does take a lot when you consider it, with the economic crisis, and it's quite challenging for everyone. For you to actually wake up in the morning and be like, you know what, we're going to do a workshop. I'm invested in this. It takes a lot of passion to do that. So how did that really come about, and like how much passion should you really have for debating to really do all of this?
But I think the short answer is a lot, but I'll elaborate. I think the reason that me and Dineth are so invested in spreading debating in Sri Lanka and making sure people have access to opportunities to compete is because we had access to those same opportunities as well when we were in school, as well as me personally, I had access to those opportunities when I got to join the national team. When we were in school, me and Dineth at Ananda College, both of us were coached by alumni who, like us, came on a voluntary basis back to school to help their juniors to succeed at the same activity that they had found success in. Similarly, when I was on the national team, I was coached by volunteers, former alumni of the national team who had the opportunity and the privilege to participate at WSDC and felt like they owed something back to the community and to the kids, and therefore chose to come back and coach on a volunteer basis. So really, I think that's the reason why we're so invested in making sure people have access to these resources, because we had the same access to those resources as well. And it just seems fair that we should sort of pave things forward. With regards to why we're so passionate about it, like we said, it's a very engaging activity. It was very fun when we were in school debating together. And it's still fun now. Even the workshops, the coaching that we do for schools that don't have coaches, the resources that we try to compile online. It's an enjoyable experience for us, both on a superficial level to engage with the activity that we enjoyed so much when we were in school, but also to understand that this does have a meaningful effect in terms of spreading debating in Sri Lanka. So I think really that's why, despite being, like you said, a non-profit volunteer organization, the Debaters Council has such strong membership and participation.
Right, and you have a mega project that's going on right now as well, after multiple selections nationally as well, and this is to do with the School Debating Championship, which is going to be international, and I think you're going to Serbia for that?
Yeah, Belgrade,
so
Serbia.
Does the council go as well, or is it just the member that is selected?
So really, to limit costs, we only send the team as well as the coaches for the team. Like you said, that is really our biggest fundraising challenge, which is how do we raise as much money as possible to be able to subsidize this group of exceptional debaters to participate at this championship. We don't really want the cost of traveling abroad to be a barrier for anyone that wants to compete. In the past, we have succeeded in raising funds, like Dineth said, from donors. But really, what we're looking for is a stable source of sponsorship so that each year we can guarantee the participation of the 5 most talented debaters at WSDC to represent Team Sri Lanka internationally at an activity where we have been doing well for the past 4 years and where we will, I have no doubt, continue to do well. And so really that's one of our goals, which is to raise enough money to make sure that everyone has the opportunity, if they're good enough and if they study debating hard enough and if they practice consistently, that they can also go despite their financial circumstances. But really, like Dineth said, we're not just an organization that is sort of narrowly focused on the 5 individuals that get selected to represent the national team. We also recognize that there are many talented debaters that, for various reasons, might not make it onto the national team. But we still want to give them access to as many opportunities as possible to compete locally, which is why we're so invested in not just maintaining debating among the few schools in the Western Province, as well as the few schools in Kandy, where we are currently active, but in as many parts of the country as possible and to as many schools as possible. So really, those are our 2 big fundraising goals, which is helping the national team and spreading debate.
Right. Dineth, Serbia is not a very easy or common country that Sri Lankans fly to, right? Getting visa there is not quite easy either. So what exactly are your challenges there? Because I feel like that's going to be a huge thing that you have to fight through.
Yeah, so currently we are in the process of applying for visa. One thing that helps actually is an invitation letter from the organization committee that they have given to us, and we also need to look at things like health insurance and some other associated costs as well. So those are things that we are currently working on as of right now to go to Serbia.
Right. Something I wanted to mention in terms of what a lot of people fail to see is the fact that it's an international representation, right? So funding in this is going to be very worth it for any organization or whatnot, because they're representing the country at the end of the day into an international platform, fighting for something that is important. So that's essential, but something I wanted to really clarify as well, when you go there, suppose you do become the winner there, is there something that goes forward from there, or is it you just bring the championship back to the country?
It's really that you do bring the championship to the country. Obviously, that comes with a lot of international recognition and prestige. In 2020, when we were the runners-up, we had the opportunity to, like we're doing right now, appear on lots of different media platforms. And that helps us achieve, like I said, our second goal, which is to spread debating. And so really, I think being the world champions in this specific activity would be a big boost to our ability to be able to encourage people in the country to be able to compete. And I guess it's not just the fact that it is an opportunity for international representation, it's also an opportunity for international excellence. We don't just participate at the World Schools Debating Championship, at least in recent history, we perform quite well there. Even against countries that you might traditionally think of as the bastions of English debating, countries like England and Canada and the United States. We do compete against them, and very frequently, it could go either way. And so really, I think that's what, if you're really invested in English debating, what you should see as what sets us apart from other activities, which is we do well in it, internationally even.
Right, I feel like you've already done a good job because you've gone to Vietnam. I'm sure you've knocked people off there. Debating is also a very, very essential thing when we consider it, in terms of the government bodies, in terms of the governance of a country as well as a whole, right? So when you compare a lot of, this is not the only organization that really brings debating and all of that, right? There are other competition as well that goes through. But what makes your debating council so significantly different to the rest of it?
So I think one of the main things that we try to focus on more than other, let's say, we have a lot of organizations that try to do debate, but also I think one thing that we try to excel at is we try to focus on the debate aspect of it as opposed to more of the public speaking aspect of it. One, I think, common misconception that a lot of organizations, I think they teach you, okay, look, we'll teach you how to do public speaking, we'll teach you how to do debate, but mostly what happens is they just teach you how to be fluent in English. But we think debating is something beyond that. Integral part of debating is having the ability to analyze, to respond to arguments, to come up with new arguments, and this is not something that I see happening in other places. So the Debaters Council, especially, we follow the WSDC format, and I think this format specifically encourages people to come up with that kind of reasoning. It rewards spending time on that kind of reasoning as opposed to things like, let's say, flashy speeches, doing cool gestures with their hands, all of that. So we think this format, all of that we promote, is something that's specifically catered to develop critical thinking in students, high schoolers, university students, all of that.
Right. Has there been someone that is still famous right now who has come out of this? I think I asked this question before as well. Is there someone famous right now in Sri Lanka?
Well, I wouldn't say famous. Certainly, I think we have many accomplished people who have been former debaters. Like we mentioned previously, the skill set that debate equips you with is integral
Could
for
you
a lot
name
of
a few, if
professional
you don't
careers. Well, I can name some of my former coaches.
Yes.
Who I had the privilege of being coached by on the national team. Kitmina Hevage is one person that comes to mind, who was in the role that Dineth is currently in about 3 years ago, who was president of the Debaters Council. They live in Hong Kong now. I think they were quite involved in public policy. Shilo Nisumantiran is another name that comes to mind, was our national team coach in 2022. Again, very involved in public policy. She now lives in the UK. So I really think it's that initial interest in debating that must have pushed them towards those careers. More recently, there are lots of teammates of mine who have gone on to attend prestigious universities. We were talking about the Ivy League. Humaid Salim, who was my teammate in 2021 and 2022, is now currently a third-year student at Harvard University. Janu De Silva, who was my teammate in 2020, is currently a sophomore at Princeton University. We have two of my former teammates currently attending the University of Cambridge in the UK. So there have been many, I think, successful people, although perhaps not famous in the sense that we would traditionally think of it.
What is the purpose of all of this? I feel like that's the big question mark there. What's the purpose of all of this?
Well, I can let Dineth answer this as well, but for me, what I see as the purpose of it is twofold. The first is, obviously, debating has a kind of very practical value, right? It equips you with a skill set that will be useful in later life. It gives you credentials, it gives you access to these opportunities to be able to go abroad, to apply to foreign universities, to be able to apply to prestigious local universities. And so really, there is that aspect to it. But lots of activities have that, right? Like you could do something else besides debating with your free time. You could focus on your academics and you might get very similar results. The thing that I think separates debating from other activities is really the fact that it isn't just an activity. For those of us who have been involved in debating, it does become like a way of life. Once you get used to that certain mode of thinking, of being always willing to question preconceptions, willing to look at arguments from the other side, it doesn't just translate into your professional life, it translates into your personal life as well. Debaters, I think, have somewhat of a bad reputation of being argumentative and very conflict oriented. But I actually think debating makes you a more empathetic person because you learn to see things from other people's perspectives. Besides that, I guess the other thing is it's a lot of fun for those of us that enjoy it. And we want to give those same opportunities to kids to be able to access that practical value, to be able to adopt that way of life, but also just to have fun in an activity that they enjoy.
So those that actually are watching right now, they're very interested, they're very invested. How can they actually get in reach with you?
Reach out to the Debaters Council. You can do this even if you don't have a school English debate society. Let's say there is no society like that. You still feel like you would enjoy this activity, you're passionate about debating. We have a website, we are the Debaters Council.
The debaterscouncil.lk is a website. You can reach us to us our Gmail, debaterscouncil@gmail.com. You can reach us on Facebook as well, and I think all our contact details are also on the website as well. If you can find our website, I think it's pretty straightforward from there on.
So you can reach out to us, even personally, and like Dineth mentioned earlier, a lot of the assistance and support that we give is highly accessible even if you don't have a coach. If you want some introductory workshops into the format, contact us and we're willing to do those workshops for you. If you want assistance with finding a coach, reach out to us and we'll connect you with alumni of Sri Lankan debating who are willing to coach schools.
I'm sure the both of you are going to do absolutely phenomenal. So thank you so much for doing this conversation. All the very best with your projects and your workshops and really building and bringing people from Jaffna and Radhapura all into one center and taking them global as well. So thank you so much for all this. And with that, of course, don't forget this is Gen XYZ right here on Other Derana 24, and we are absolutely thankful for this amazingly beautiful aesthetic place. It's Felicita Cafe, located at a very convenient location as well at down the Flower Road. So if you do want to come by, grab yourself a cup of coffee, this is definitely the location. So with that, if you do miss out on an episode, we are available on youtube.com/OtherDerana English. And with that, I shall see you on a different episode right here only on Gen XYZ.
Tell them apart. Tell me to run, but I can't. 'Cause my heart goes.